My name is Jeremy Bradley. I'm the district manager for Northern Colorado. I oversee 3 hauling sites within this region, one in Ault, one in Estes Park, and one in Sterling. So it really came down to the infrastructure within this region and the compatibility with our customers, really. And that's what it came down to. We had an older fleet that we knew that we needed to invest into, and the region within this area really held or gave the ability for us to implement the CNG infrastructure. So as an enterprise, we do have our sustainability report, and our goal is to implement CNG in as many hauling facilities as possible. I would say it's a very in-depth process, and taking a look at your area and I guess your ability to adapt, the infrastructure definitely is costly. So if you have the ability to look at those costs on a higher level, as well as any credits or funds or grants, definitely would be feasible.
Absolutely.
Yeah, so as part of this infrastructure, we've taken part in our Ault Fuels grant. That's a state program, and at a higher level to enterprise-wide, we have RNG infrastructure that we can technically, or we can talk about a little more in depth. I'll be very transparent and say that it was a multi-step process,
Okay.
which did take a little while. And there are people in place and assistance available to help you understand and fully implement that process or that grant. So we only run compressed natural gas vehicles out here, and as we transition into CNG, we do still run diesel. We will continue to run diesel trucks until we fully implement CNG, but it will be a multi-step and multi-year process to transition to 100% CNG. So I would say the biggest opportunity and that we would encounter and continue to encounter is the infrastructure. Having the wide availability of fueling stations, you can go to a gas station anywhere and on every street corner, and you can fill up your truck. But with CNG, that's not the case. There are certain areas where it's available, certain areas where it's not available. And within our territory, we have a vast region that comprises of mountains, grasslands, long distance, and so we need the infrastructure to help build our business. So as technology advances, especially within these trucks, we have the capability of adding more tanks to the truck and help us go a little bit further distance, so that way we can make it back to the yard, and no matter where we're at within this region, we have that ability to go the further distance. And especially with these trucks and with CNG, it does make it just a tad more fuel efficient, so we are able to travel a little further. So the average range for a trash truck, a diesel trash truck, is 3 miles to the gallon. And with CNG, we're able to travel 5 to 6 miles to the gallon. And sometimes even a little bit further than that. On multi-levels, not only because it's a newer fleet, we've been able to save on preventative measures and maintenance and all of our PMs as well. And we're not repairing the trucks as well or as often as we were with our older fleet. So definitely seeing cost savings within that aspect, but also as we transition to an alternative fuel, the CNG So with the RNG system and the RNG infrastructure, what we have as an enterprise-wide are two facilities in the Midwest that actually pump the gas back into the infrastructure, which allows us to take those credits and use it here at this site. The operation of the truck and the driving capability is definitely night and day. The types of engine and the CNG infrastructure that we have here, the engines actually run quieter, so it helps us with city ordinances and servicing customers within residential neighborhoods. So that for one is probably one of the biggest differences that our drivers know and experience and can relate to our residential customers on a daily basis. So I would say that our biggest opportunity at the very beginning of our journey towards CNG was the training aspect and the education portion of it. A lot of our technicians had to go through extensive hours of training with McNeilus, with Autocar, and with our CNG partners to know how to safely work on these vehicles. And so that was probably the biggest thing that we've encountered. On another note too, we have partners here that also work on our CNG infrastructure, our station here, and our technicians have to be trained in that as well to know how to operate it, know when to shut it down, different PMs that they might have for that too. I would say that we're extremely proud of the infrastructure that we've been able to implement here. We've invested heavily into our community, and we pride ourselves on that. We know that we're doing a great thing for all of our customers. We know that these trucks have zero emissions, and that this infrastructure will be here for years to come, and it's not going away. So we're excited to be a part of the cutting edge technology that's been available to us, and we'll continue to move and change and adapt as new directives come. All right, I'd like to introduce you to Matt Charles. He's my district fleet manager. He's going to take you on a tour of the CNG station.
Okay. Hi. So I guess we can start out here where we tied in. We'll just kind of go through the flow of gas. We'll talk about some of the components, and then we can go over and check out the online fueling. So originally, I don't know if you can capture it, but out here, so we tied into a gas line out right off this county road. We did tie in. It was a 750 psi gas line. So they actually stepped down the pressure coming to our site down to like 450 psi. So that is something to keep in mind, and that will differ on what kind of compressors you need for the station. We can get away with a 3-stage, but if you're coming in at 20 psi, something like that, you'll have to do like a 5-stage compressor. So there is differences on pricing for that kind of stuff. So anyways, after we tapped in, gas does come in right here. Everything controlled with a fire valve, sensors, all that kind of stuff. But it flows in and then it goes through our dryers. So basically just to remove all the moisture from the gas in the lines, it does sit in here. From there, it gets piped over to our compressors. We do have 2 compressors in here, and like I said, they're 3-stage compressors. One runs, and then we have, if an issue comes up, that one will go down, the other one will run. They don't run simultaneously. So after they go through the compressors, they are pumped in the small steel lines, and that goes out to our truck lines, and they time fuel overnight. So other than that, that's pretty much the basics of what our fueling station is. So for us, CGRS does all of our maintenance on our high pressure side of our system. They are trained, they're qualified to do all that kind of stuff. We do have, so there's a couple lights up here on top of our control panel. So if there's a fault on our system, they'll turn red. We'll get emails, we get phone calls, so it's all tied in on the communication side. But we call them and they come out and they'll fix anything on the station itself. And like I said, at the very beginning of this, kind of getting all this, working through the quirks and all that, it was, there was a few days where it was kind of trying, but after that, we've been running pretty successfully without issue. So very important that we have two compressors, right? So they're both operational at all times. If one goes down, we'll still fuel that night for the trucks. That gives us a little bit of time to fix the second one. If they both go down, like Jeremy talked about earlier, the infrastructure of the area, that's what we have to rely on. And I think at this point, there's only like 3 stations available for us. So yeah, it is, if we have both go down or lose power, something like that, it does up that sense of urgency to get it fixed. Does decrease emissions, sustainability across the industry wide, or our industry. I do want to point out, so we just set this smaller compressor last week, and we are actually piloting this compressor to be put in more rural areas to be able to expand our infrastructure. So once this one is plumbed in, we will test it, we'll abuse it, we'll try to break it so we can fine tune that before they go into the smaller sites and start expanding our footprint. So I think that's fantastic. So this is where we fast fill trucks. They can pull up, they just hook that hose right to the front of the trucks right here. And it takes 15 or 20 minutes. The thing with fast fill is it will not get as much pressure as if a truck was parked out here on line to do a time fill overnight. So it's great in the middle of the day if a truck comes in, dumps in the landfill, and he's starting to run a little bit low, he can swing by, grab a little bit of fuel, and go right back out. But that's just a secondary measure to make sure that we don't run out of fuel out there. With the time fill, it just slowly fuels the trucks overnight. The amount of pressure it puts in there, it equalizes across the entire fleet. Temperature varies that, so higher temperature, higher pressure, lower temperature, it's a little more dense, so it's not quite as high pressure. But time fuel does allow it to basically max out the storage on the tanks on the vehicles. Fast fill does not do that. So a time fill for our entire fleet, which we have 28 trucks, takes about 4 hours, and it tops off every single truck at the same time. A fast fill, about 15 or 20 minutes, depending on how much gas. Yeah, super easy. So it's just got a quick connect on the end here, and you just put it right on the truck, and then you just turn this to fill. And you should hear the compressor kick in if it's low enough. So we didn't open any of the doors in there, but there are a ton of pressure sensors, gauges, all kinds of stuff. So it's looking for its max PSI for this system. So we're pulling from the tank and it's dropping the tank value. So as it starts equalizing, it'll shut that off and then you'll know it's on. So at the end, all you gotta do is flip it to vent. I don't know if you caught that, but you heard it vent out. Okay, make sure you put the caps back on and then you are filled.
To operate down there, right? It's way hotter. They have on average 108 degrees or 100-degree days, and what we do down there is really time it again, like Matt was explaining, and also give it that little extra punch right before we leave the yard. So our compressors will kick on and pump, a higher pressure just before our trucks leave the yard and before we disconnect. That way we get a little more fuel into the system and we can run a little bit longer. Okay, so the facility, the shop itself, we did have to upgrade our ventilation.
So we added in 3 exhaust fans throughout the shop all the way down. They are tied into an alarm system. So if we have a gas leak in the shop and it gets up to the sensors, the alarms go off, every other door opens, and all 3 fans kick on at the same time.
The other one's labeled.
Yep, the ones that are labeled, those are the ones that auto open if there's a gas leak. And then we also had to upgrade our heaters. So our old heaters in the shop were not approved for a CNG facility. So they had to tear down all the old heaters and install new heaters, re-weld them, get all those installed as well, all the way throughout the whole facility. So the whole facility was done within about 8 weeks, like I said. To finalize the wiring, all that kind of stuff, took a little bit longer than that. Technician training, as Russ said, was about 15 hours, give or take. Total cost, I don't have the split out for the facility and the compound, all that. I know the total cost was a 1.8 million for just this whole setup.
Well, we're seeing the drivers are a lot of less power as far as takeoff. Their hydraulics are affected by it a little more. It doesn't have that snap response that a diesel engine has on it. When we bring them in, we have to make sure we sniff them with the sniffer to make sure that there's no gas leaks on them. If we're doing any sort of welding at all on them, we have to defuel them, shut the gas valves off, run them out of fuel. Yeah, it's just you got to really be aware of it because it's so high pressure.
And I think that's a good point. So the torque a diesel puts out, the CNG is nowhere near that torque. So you do lose a little bit of power, for sure. That's a good point.
Well, some of them have a little more. It's a little harder starting in the winter. Some of them. I think it's just because of the fuel so cold. The CNG fuel so cold that it's not compression ignited, it's spark ignited, so it seems like it takes them a little sometimes to get going. And they got to crank at a certain RPM as well, and if they're not cranking at that RPM, they won't fire.
So we actually do that in-house. We put on a program and it rotates, so they got to send pieces of tanks to different sites, and the technicians in that area, you sign up for a class. So it's to be determined. This year with COVID, after we put all this in, it's kind of switched up that training. So we're still looking for the next opportunity to get somebody down to it. So all the training we did up to this point would be online training. How many hours did that take?
About 15 hours, I think, online, 16 hours.
Or so of training online. And then, as I spoke of earlier, we still have to get one guy in for a tank certification, and then we can do our own tank certifications in-house. At this point, we have to have third party do that. I guess I'm not sure on that one yet. We're 1 year in right now, so It's still pretty new to us. But we're building on that and kind of learning as we go here.
They have added some more modules as far as Cummins, is it, or RNG? They've added more modules, so I think they're going to keep adding. Like you said, it's hard to tell, but since we've taken it, they have added a couple of modules.
So I think originally it started with, was it 12 or 14? Now they're up to 16 modules for the training. So, for any technician on any vehicle, training never stops. So it's always a building foundational piece for what we do. I think it is, and I think it's something to be proud of. And there's not a lot of companies out there that are truly making this transition to CNG. And it's something that Waste Management, kind of put their foot down and said, this is where we're going. So I think it's something that, we're on this ride together. We're building it, we're learning as we're going. But CNG for us here has made a monumental change in where we were. Upgrading the fleet, getting the new vehicles, they're a lot quieter. Just all that kind of stuff is great selling points to build on careers for people to be here.
Emissions is less.
Yep, emissions.
Guys, this is really, really great. Thank you guys so much for the information.
Okay, I appreciate it.